My name is Olivia Bennett. 3 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize, with a pounding headache and no clear memory of how I got there. The last thing I remembered was standing in my brother Ethan's living room, arguing with his fiancée, Madison. A nurse told me I had a concussion, but that wasn't the part that hurt the most. The real pain came a few minutes later when my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was a message from Ethan. Just one sentence. No explanation, no concern, no question about whether I was okay. It simply said, "Don't contact us again." And in that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong, because the brother I grew up with would never have written those words. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If someone you trusted your entire life suddenly turned against you overnight, would you walk away quietly, or would you fight to uncover the truth? Write in the comments. Truth always comes out. And tell me where you're watching from today. Because what I discovered about my brother's fiancée changed everything. If I could go back in time, I would choose that morning. Not because anything special happened, but because it was the last time my life felt completely normal. It was a quiet Saturday. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window of my small apartment in Chicago, warming the wooden table where I was halfway through a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. My phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Ethan. My older brother had a habit of calling me early on weekends, usually just to complain about work or to ask if I had eaten something that wasn't instant noodles. When I answered, I heard the same familiar voice that had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. "Liv," he said, cheerful in a way that immediately caught my attention. "Are you busy today?" "That depends," I replied. "Is this one of your random life updates, or did you break something again?" He laughed, and then he said the words that would quietly shift everything in my world. "I'm engaged." For a moment, I just stared at the coffee mug in my hands. "Engaged?" I repeated. "Yeah. Her name's Madison. I've been meaning to introduce you to. I should have felt surprised. Maybe even suspicious. But mostly, I felt happy for him. Ethan had spent years focused on work after our parents died. For a long time, it had just been the two of us navigating life the best we could. "You've been hiding a fiancé from me?" I teased. "Not hiding," he said quickly. "Just waiting for the right moment." A few hours later, I found myself standing outside Ethan's townhouse with a bottle of wine in my hand. The door opened before I could knock. And there she was, Madison Blake. She was taller than I expected, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confident smile that seemed designed for photographs. "Olivia," she said warmly, stepping forward to hug me. Her perfume was soft and floral. "Too perfect. I've heard so much about you." I smiled politely, hopefully nothing embarrassing. "Oh no," she said with a small laugh. "Ethan talks about you all the time." Something in her tone lingered for a fraction of a second too long. Then she tilted her head slightly and added, "Family relationships can be complicated sometimes." I wasn't sure why, but the comment left a faint ripple of discomfort in my chest. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared behind her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "See?" he said proudly. "Told you she's amazing." Madison's smile widened, and just like that, the strange moment passed. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner together, Madison lifted her glass and said casually, "We should do this again soon." I nodded, unaware that the next time we all sat in that room together, my life would never be the same. Dinner started the way most family dinners do. Too much food, too many polite smiles, and the quiet pressure of everyone trying to make a good impression. Madison had set the table with the kind of attention to detail you usually only see in magazines. White candles, linen napkins folded into neat triangles, even small handwritten place cards. Mine said Olivia in perfect looping cursive. "Wow," I said, setting the bottle of wine on the counter. "This looks like a restaurant." Madison smiled, almost shyly. "I like things to feel special." Ethan beamed beside her. "See? I told you she's amazing." We sat down, and for the first 10 minutes, everything felt perfectly normal. Ethan talked about work. I told a story about an editor who had accidentally sent an entire article draft to the wrong newspaper. Madison laughed in all the right places, nodding along like someone who had already memorized the rhythm of our conversations. But slowly, something about the way she looked at me began to feel different. Too observant. Too precise. Halfway through dinner, Ethan stood up to grab another bottle of wine from the kitchen. The moment he disappeared around the corner, Madison leaned slightly toward me. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes sharpened. "Have you always depended on Ethan this much?" For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "I'm sorry?" "I just mean," she continued lightly, swirling the wine in her glass. "He talks about you a lot. How he helped you after college. How you two are so close." She paused. "Not everyone gets that kind of support system." The words sounded polite, but the tone underneath them wasn't. "I wouldn't call it dependence," I said carefully. "We're just family." Madison tilted her head. "Of course." Then she added quietly, "Sometimes people don't realize when family closeness starts becoming something else." Before I could respond, Ethan returned with the wine bottle. "Did I miss something?" he asked. "Nothing," Madison said quickly, smiling at him. "We were just talking about how lucky you are to have such a loyal sister." Something about the way she said the word loyal made it sound almost like an accusation. Ethan laughed. "Well, she's been stuck with me her whole life." "I wouldn't say stuck," I said, but Madison's eyes flicked toward me again. And for a moment, I felt like I was being evaluated. The rest of dinner continued with small, subtle shifts. Madison interrupted me more often when I spoke. She corrected details in stories Ethan and I had told for years. Once, when I mentioned a childhood memory about our parents, she placed a gentle hand on Ethan's arm and said softly, "You don't have to dwell on the past anymore." The comment sounded kind, but it also felt like a door quietly closing. By the time dessert arrived, an uncomfortable tension had settled in the room. Ethan didn't seem to notice, but Madison did. When Ethan stood again to answer a phone call in the hallway, Madison turned toward me once more. This time her smile disappeared completely. "I think we should talk," she said. "About what?" "About boundaries." Her voice was calm, controlled, and suddenly the room felt colder. "Now?" I asked. Madison stood up slowly. "Yes," she said. Then she gestured toward the hallway. "Privately." And somehow, even before I followed her out of the dining room, I had the uneasy feeling that whatever conversation was about to happen was going to change everything. Madison led me into the hallway just outside the dining room. The house suddenly felt quieter there, the warm noise of dinner fading behind us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Madison crossed her arms and leaned lightly against the wall, studying me with the same sharp expression I had noticed earlier. Except now she wasn't smiling. "I'm going to be honest with you," she said calmly. "That would be refreshing." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "You're very protective of Ethan." The statement sounded harmless, but the way she said it made it feel like an accusation. "He's my brother," I replied. Madison nodded slowly. "Yes? Exactly." The word exactly hung in the air like a challenge. "You two have been very close for a long time," she continued, "since our parents died." "I know," Madison said softly. Her voice almost sounded sympathetic, but then she added, "And that kind of closeness can become unhealthy." I stared at her. I'm sorry. What? She pushed away from the wall and stepped closer. I'm saying that Ethan is building a new life now. A life with me. And? And sometimes people have trouble letting go of their role in someone else's life. The meaning behind her words hit me all at once. You think I'm competing with you? Madison shrugged. I think you're used to being the most important woman in his life. That's ridiculous. Is it? Her calmness was unsettling. You show up unannounced, she continued. You call him every morning. You have opinions about everything he does. I'm his sister. And I'm his fiancée. For a moment, the hallway was completely silent. Then Madison took another step toward me. I'm not saying this to hurt your feelings, she said. I'm saying it because boundaries matter. Something inside my chest tightened. Boundaries? I repeated. Yes. Her voice became colder. And one of those boundaries is understanding that Ethan's life doesn't revolve around you anymore. I felt my patience snap. I never said it did. But you act like it. That's not true. Madison laughed softly. It wasn't a kind laugh. You know, she said, I've dealt with people like you before. People like me. Women who don't realize when they've become emotionally dependent on someone. The accusation landed like a slap. That's not what this is, I said, my voice rising. Madison's expression hardened. Then why do you look so threatened by me? I'm not threatened by you. Oh, you are, she replied quietly. And the sooner you accept that Ethan's priorities have changed, the easier this will be for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently. Madison stepped even closer now. Too close. I'm trying to help you understand something, she said. What? That your place in Ethan's life is going to change. I folded my arms. You don't get to decide that. Madison's eyes narrowed. I already have. Before I could respond, she reached out suddenly, grabbing my arm. The movement caught me completely off guard. Let go, I said sharply. Not until you listen. I said, let go. I pulled my arm back. The motion caused Madison to stumble slightly. Her expression instantly twisted into anger. You see? She snapped. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I barely touched you. But before I could finish the sentence, Madison shoved me. Hard. My back hit the wall behind me. For a split second, everything went silent. Then my head struck the edge of a wooden shelf. Pain exploded behind my eyes. The hallway spun violently around me. The last thing I remember seeing was Madison standing over me, her face pale, her hands trembling. And then, everything went dark. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the light. Bright, sterile, and painfully white. It flooded my vision in a way that made my head throb instantly, like someone had turned the volume of the world up too high. For a few seconds I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling above me, trying to understand where I was. It took a moment before the faint smell of antiseptic reached me. Hospital. My throat felt dry. My head pounded with a deep, dull ache that seemed to pulse behind my eyes. When I tried to lift my hand, something tugged at my arm. An IV line. Hey, a calm voice said nearby. Easy. I turned my head slowly. A man in blue scrubs sat in a chair beside the bed, a tablet resting on his knee. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with tired eyes and the kind of steady presence that made you feel like nothing in the room was truly out of control. You're awake, he said. What happened? My voice sounded strange, thick and weak. You had a concussion, he replied gently, and a mild head injury. Nothing life-threatening, but you're going to have a nasty headache for a few days. The words barely registered. Fragments of memory flickered in my mind. Dinner. The hallway. Madison's face, then the sudden force of her hands. My stomach twisted. Did someone bring me here? I asked. The doctor nodded. Your brother. Ethan. Relief washed over me so suddenly that my eyes stung. Of course he had. No matter what happened, Ethan would always. He left about 20 minutes ago, the doctor added. The relief faded. Left? He said he had things to sort out. Something in the doctor's tone suggested he had chosen his words carefully. What about Madison? I asked. The doctor hesitated. She's the one who explained what happened. My pulse quickened. What did she say? That you two were arguing, he replied, and that you slipped while trying to leave the hallway. Slipped. The word echoed in my mind. That's not. The doctor raised a hand slightly. You should focus on resting right now. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't entirely convinced by the story either. The room fell quiet. Machines hummed softly around me. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past. My head hurt too much to think clearly. Then my phone vibrated against the small hospital table beside the bed. The sound felt absurdly loud in the silence. I reached for it slowly. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the screen. One new message. From Ethan. My chest tightened. For a moment, I felt an overwhelming wave of relief. He must have realized something was wrong. Maybe he had questions. Maybe he wanted to talk. Maybe he... I opened the message, and the words on the screen seemed to freeze the air around me. Don't contact us again. That was it. No explanation. No concern. No. Are you okay? Just that. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The hospital room felt suddenly colder. My heart pounded painfully in my chest as I read the message again, and again, and again. The words didn't change, but something about them felt wrong. Not just cruel. Wrong. Because I had known Ethan my entire life. I knew how he texted, how he joked, how he worried. And the sentence on my screen didn't sound like my brother at all. I must have read the message at least 20 times. The words didn't change. They didn't soften. They didn't suddenly reveal some hidden meaning I had missed the first 19 times. Don't contact us again. Every time I looked at the screen, the sentence felt just as cold as the first time. I tried to imagine Ethan typing it, sitting somewhere with his phone in his hand, thinking about me, thinking about everything we had been through growing up. Then deciding those 5 words were enough. It didn't make sense. My brother could be stubborn. He could even be dramatic when he was upset. But he had never been cruel. Especially not to me. My thumb hovered over the call button before I could stop myself. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then the line went silent. Straight to voicemail. I swallowed. Maybe he was still driving home from the hospital. Maybe Madison was upset and he was trying to calm her down. Maybe. I tried again. This time the call didn't even ring. Blocked. The realization hit slowly. My stomach dropped. He had blocked my number. I stared at the phone, my heart beating harder with every passing second. Everything okay? The doctor asked quietly from across the room. I forced a small nod. Yeah. It was a lie. Nothing about this felt okay. I set the phone down, but my mind refused to stop replaying the message, the wording, the tone, the punctuation. Ethan always texted the same way. He used too many exclamation points. He wrote in short bursts of messages instead of one sentence. Sometimes he even added stupid emojis he thought were funny. But this message, it sounded like something written by someone trying to be final, controlled, almost formal. My chest tightened. I picked up the phone again and opened our old conversations. Hundreds of messages filled the screen. Inside jokes, random photos, arguments about which pizza place was better. I scrolled through them slowly, comparing the way he wrote to the sentence still glowing at the top of my notifications. They didn't match. Not even close. And then another memory surfaced. A small detail from earlier that evening. One I hadn't thought much about at the time. During dinner, Ethan had gone to the kitchen twice to grab wine. Both times, he had left his phone on the table. And both times, Madison had picked it up. I could see it clearly now. The way she casually turned the screen toward herself. The way her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. At the time, I had assumed she was checking something for him. A message. Maybe directions. Something normal. But now the image felt different. Unsettling. My heartbeat quickened. Because when Ethan went into the hallway to answer that phone call, he had left his phone behind again, and Madison had been standing right next to it. The realization crept into my mind slowly, so slowly that at first I didn't want to believe it. But once the thought formed, it refused to leave. What if Ethan hadn't sent that message at all? I stared at the phone in my hands. The screen reflected my pale expression back at me, and for the first time since I woke up in that hospital room, a new possibility began to take shape. Maybe my brother hadn't turned against me. Maybe someone else had spoken for him. The hospital discharged me the next afternoon. The doctor insisted I rest for a few days, but resting was the last thing my mind seemed capable of doing. By the time the taxi dropped me in front of my apartment building, the headache behind my eyes had settled into a steady, dull pressure. Every step up the stairs felt heavier than usual, like my body was still trying to catch up with everything that had happened. Inside my apartment, the silence felt strange, too quiet. I set my keys on the counter and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop. For a while, I didn't open it. Part of me wanted to believe I was overthinking everything. That maybe Ethan had been angry, confused, overwhelmed. Maybe the message really had come from him. But the more I replayed the memory of Madison holding his phone, the less believable that explanation felt. Finally, I opened the laptop. The glow of the screen lit up the darkened kitchen. I typed 2 words into the search bar. Madison Blake. The results appeared instantly. Most of the links led to the same places: Instagram, lifestyle blogs, a small influencer page where Madison posted carefully curated photos of travel, wine tastings, and elegant dinners. Every image looked perfect. Too perfect. Scrolling through the photos, I noticed something else. There were hundreds of pictures of Madison, but almost none of them included other people. No old friends, no family, no long-term relationships. Just Madison. Again and again. I clicked on one of her posts from about a year ago. It showed her standing on a beach somewhere, the sunset glowing behind her. The caption read, "Some endings are necessary to make space for better beginnings." The comment section was mostly harmless. Compliments, heart emojis, random strangers praising the view. But then one comment caught my eye. A single line buried halfway down the thread. The username was unfamiliar. At Mark Harrison 78. The message read, "You ruined my life the same way you're ruining his." My fingers froze on the keyboard. I clicked the profile. The account looked ordinary enough. A middle-aged man. A few photos of fishing trips. A dog. Nothing that screamed drama. But when I scrolled through his older posts, I found something that made my stomach twist. 2 years earlier, there was a photo of him standing next to a woman with blonde hair, a woman whose smile looked painfully familiar. Madison. The caption under the photo read, "Engaged to the most incredible woman I've ever met." The date made my chest tighten. 2 years ago, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. If that was true, then Madison had been engaged before. Maybe that wasn't unusual. People break up all the time. But the angry comment on her photo suggested something else entirely. My heart beat faster as a thought slowly formed in my mind. What if Ethan wasn't the first person Madison had isolated from their family? What if he was just the latest? I hovered over the message button on Mark Harrison's profile. For a long moment, I hesitated. Contacting a stranger about something this personal felt reckless, but the image of Madison standing in that hallway came rushing back to me. The push, the impact, the darkness, and the message that followed. Don't contact us again. My fingers moved before I could talk myself out of it. I typed a short message. Hi, my name is Olivia Bennett. I think we might need to talk about Madison Blake. I stared at the screen after sending it. The apartment felt even quieter now. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. Minutes ticked by. Nothing happened. Then suddenly, my laptop chimed. A reply. I opened the message. The words were short, but they made my blood run cold. She did the same thing to me. For a few seconds after reading the message, I just sat there staring at the screen. The words felt heavier than they should have been. She did the same thing to me. I read them again, hoping maybe I had misunderstood. But the sentence didn't leave much room for interpretation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed back. What do you mean? The reply came almost immediately. You're Olivia, right? Ethan's sister? A cold chill slid down my spine. How do you know that? I wrote. 3 small dots appeared on the screen as he typed. They disappeared, then reappeared again. Finally, another message arrived. Because Madison used to talk about you. My chest tightened. When? There was a pause before the next message came through. Back when we were engaged. The words made my stomach drop. Even though I had already seen the old photo, something about hearing him confirm it directly made it feel more real. You were engaged to Madison? I typed. 2 years ago. The apartment suddenly felt colder. What happened? For nearly a minute there was no response. I wondered if maybe he had changed his mind. Then a longer message appeared. At first she was incredible. Charming. Supportive. Everyone loved her. She told me she admired how close I was with my family. My mom. My sister. My friends. My pulse quickened. But slowly things started changing. Another message appeared. She'd say my sister was too controlling. She'd say my mom didn't respect our relationship. She'd say my friends didn't understand her. My stomach twisted as I read each line. The pattern felt disturbingly familiar. Did you believe her? I asked. His reply came quickly. At first, I defended everyone, but she was patient. Very patient. Another message appeared. Little arguments, small misunderstandings. Eventually, it started feeling like everyone in my life was against her. My heart pounded. Because that was exactly what Madison had tried to do with me at dinner. Mark continued typing. One by one, my relationships started breaking down. My sister stopped talking to me. My mom thought I was choosing Madison over family. Friends disappeared. I leaned back in my chair slowly. The similarities were impossible to ignore. What happened after that? I asked. This time the response took longer. When it arrived, it was only 2 sentences, but they were enough to make my hands go cold. We had a fight one night. I ended up in the hospital. My breath caught. The room felt suddenly too quiet. Did she hurt you? I typed. There was another long pause. Then one final message appeared. She said I attacked her first. I closed my eyes for a moment. The hallway. Madison's hands. The way she had looked down at me after I hit the wall. When I opened my eyes again, another message from Mark had appeared. Listen carefully, Olivia. Madison doesn't just fight with people. She isolates them. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed. That's what she's doing to Ethan, isn't it? The response came instantly. Yes. Then another message followed. The last one. And somehow the most frightening. If you don't stop her, your brother will lose everyone. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Not as a patient. As someone looking for answers. The headache was still there. a dull pressure behind my temples, but it had become background noise compared to the thoughts racing through my mind. Mark's messages had replayed in my head all night. The manipulation, the isolation, the hospital. Every piece of his story lined up too perfectly with what had happened to me. If Madison had done this before, then I needed proof. The hospital lobby smelled exactly the same as it had the night before. Clean, sterile, and faintly metallic. When I reached the emergency department desk, the nurse looked up with mild surprise. "Back so soon?" "I'm looking for the doctor who treated me yesterday," I said. She glanced at the computer. "Dr. Carter?" "Yes. He's finishing a shift. I'll see if he's available." A few minutes later, Daniel Carter stepped through the double doors. He looked slightly less composed than he had the night before. His dark hair a little messier, his eyes showing the fatigue of a long shift. But when he saw me, his expression shifted to concern. "Olivia, right?" I nodded. "I hope you're not here because the symptoms got worse." "No," I said. "The concussion's about the same." He crossed his arms. "Then what brings you back?" I hesitated. "How did you explain something like this without sounding paranoid?" Finally, I said the only honest thing. "I need to ask you something about my injury." Daniel studied me for a moment before gesturing toward a quiet hallway. "Let's talk over here." We stepped into a small consultation room. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. I sat down across from him. "My brother's fiancée told everyone I slipped," I said. Daniel didn't respond right away. "She said I fell while trying to leave the hallway." Still silence. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. "And you don't think that's what happened?" It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "I remember the argument. And? And I remember her pushing me." The words sounded heavier once they were spoken out loud. Daniel exhaled slowly. "I can't comment on who pushed who," he said carefully. "But I can explain the injury." My heart started beating faster. He opened the tablet on the desk and turned it slightly toward me. "This is the CT scan from last night." The gray image on the screen meant nothing to me. But Daniel pointed to a small area near the side of the skull. "You see this impact point?" I nodded slowly. "That kind of injury usually happens when someone's head hits a fixed edge with force." "Like a shelf?" I asked quietly. "Exactly." My stomach tightened. "But here's the thing." Daniel tapped the screen again. "The angle matters." "What do you mean?" He turned the tablet back toward himself and folded his hands together. "If someone slips and falls on their own, the impact tends to come from a downward motion." He paused. "But your injury came from the side." The words settled heavily between us. "So what does that mean?" I asked. Daniel held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said something that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "People don't usually get injuries like yours from slipping." My pulse pounded in my ears. "You're saying someone pushed me?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he chose his words with careful precision. "I'm saying the medical evidence doesn't support the story you were given." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The quiet hum of the hospital filled the room. Finally, Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Olivia," he said, "whatever happened in that house last night, it wasn't an accident." When I left the hospital, the sky outside was already turning gray. Rain hung low in the clouds above the city, the kind that seemed to press down on everything. It matched the heaviness sitting in my chest. Daniel's words echoed in my head the entire drive home. It wasn't an accident. The sentence had changed something inside me. Before that moment, there had still been a small part of me hoping this whole situation was just a misunderstanding. Maybe Ethan had reacted badly in the heat of the moment. Maybe Madison had panicked. Maybe. But now the truth felt clearer. Someone had pushed me. And someone had lied about it. When I reached my apartment, the first thing I did was pick up my phone again. I opened Ethan's contact. Still blocked. I tried calling anyway. The call failed instantly. My chest tightened. Okay, I muttered to myself. If I can't call you, I'll message you another way. I opened our old text thread again and typed slowly. Ethan, please listen to me. Something isn't right about what Madison told you. I need to talk to you. I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. Delivered. But minutes passed. Then 10 minutes. Then 20. No response. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe Madison was with him. Maybe... My phone vibrated suddenly. My heart jumped. But when I looked down, it wasn't Ethan. It was an automated message from my email app. Delivery failure notice. Confused, I opened the notification. The email I had sent Ethan earlier that morning had been returned. The message read, "Your email could not be delivered. Recipient mailbox unavailable." That didn't make sense. Ethan used his email constantly for work. His inbox couldn't just disappear. Unless something had changed. I opened my laptop and tried again. Subject, we need to talk. I kept the message simple. Ethan, I know something about last night doesn't add up. Please call me when you see this. I pressed send. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then the screen refreshed. Another error. Message blocked. My heartbeat quickened. Blocked? That wasn't possible. Not unless Ethan had manually set a filter. But Ethan barely knew how to organize his spam folder. There was no way he suddenly started setting complex email blocks. A cold thought crept into my mind. I opened Ethan's social media profile. The page loaded. But something felt strange. His account looked quieter. Several old photos were gone. Pictures from family gatherings. Vacation photos. Even a photo of the three of us from last Christmas had disappeared. The more I scrolled, the more obvious it became. Someone had been cleaning up his account, removing anything connected to me. My stomach twisted. Because Ethan would never erase family photos like that. Never. But Madison might. I sat back slowly, staring at the screen. Mark's words echoed in my mind again. She isolates them. First friends, then family, then anyone who might challenge her. My eyes drifted back to the phone in my hand. The blocked calls, the missing photos, the rejected emails. All of it pointed to the same unsettling possibility. Madison wasn't just influencing Ethan. She was controlling the information that reached him. And if that was true, then every message I had tried to send him might have been read by Madison first. The realization sent a chill down my spine, because it meant something even worse. Ethan might not know I had tried to contact him at all. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the same thoughts circled back through my mind like restless birds. The blocked calls, the missing photos, the returned emails. None of it made sense unless someone had changed things from Ethan's side. And there was only one person who had access to his phone. Madison. At 3 a.m, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table again with my laptop open. The apartment was completely silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My inbox chimed softly. A new message from Mark. "Did you talk to Ethan?" I typed back immediately. "I can't reach him. My number is blocked. Emails won't go through." There was a short pause. Then his reply appeared. "That sounds familiar." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Another message popped onto the screen. "Madison used to do that with my phone, too." I leaned closer to the screen. "Do what?" The typing dots appeared. Then the explanation came. She always knew my passwords, said it was about trust. Eventually, she started checking my messages just to make sure nobody was disrespecting our relationship. My stomach twisted. "Did you give her your phone willingly?" "At first, yeah." Another message arrived. Then it stopped being optional. A chill ran down my spine. What happened? His answer came slowly, one message at a time. She'd take my phone when we argued. She'd read conversations before I could. Sometimes she'd even reply to people for me. My hands froze over the keyboard. Reply. Pretending to be you? Yes. My heart started pounding. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had moved closer overnight. One day my sister showed up at my apartment furious, Mark continued. She said I sent her a message telling her to stay out of my life. The room felt impossibly quiet as I read those words, but I never wrote that message. A cold realization spread slowly through my chest, because I had heard that exact sentence before. Don't contact us again. I stared at my phone lying on the table beside the laptop. The message Ethan supposedly sent me was still there. 5 words. Short, cold, final. The more I looked at it, the more unnatural it felt. Not just the tone, the punctuation, the structure. Everything about it felt calculated. Not emotional, not impulsive. Controlled. Like someone trying to sound decisive. Mark sent another message. I didn't realize what she was doing until it was too late. By then my family thought I had cut them off. My chest tightened. Because that was exactly what Madison wanted. Isolation. Control. A person cut off from everyone else had nowhere to turn. My eyes drifted back to Ethan's message again. And suddenly, I remembered something else. That night at dinner. Ethan had stepped away to answer a call. His phone had stayed on the table, right beside Madison, and when he came back, he never checked it. A slow, terrifying thought formed in my mind. What if Ethan never sent that message at all? What if Madison had typed it herself, using his phone, before I even woke up in the hospital? My pulse pounded in my ears, because if that was true, then Ethan might still believe I had attacked Madison, and worse, he might not even know I had been trying to reach him. The next person I called wasn't Ethan, it was Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Olivia? I need to talk to you, I said. There was a short pause on the other end of the line. Is everything okay? No, I admitted. Not even close. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a small cafe across the street from the hospital. Rain tapped softly against the windows while the evening crowd moved past outside. Daniel listened quietly as I explained everything. Mark, the engagement, the manipulation, the hospital incident, and finally the message Ethan had supposedly sent. When I finished, Daniel leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. That's a lot, he said carefully. I know. You're saying this woman has a pattern of isolating her partners from family. Yes. And you think she's doing the same thing to your brother? I don't think, I said. I'm almost sure. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you have proof? The word hung in the air between us. Proof. That was the problem. Right now, everything I had was circumstantial. Stories, patterns, memories. But none of it would convince Ethan. Not yet, I admitted. Daniel took a sip of his coffee, thinking. If your brother believes her version of events, he said, then anything you say will just sound like more conflict. I know. So the only thing that will change his mind is something objective. Like what? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made my heart skip. Evidence, I laughed softly. Right. That would help. I'm serious. He leaned forward slightly. You said the argument happened in the hallway of your brother's house. Yes. Modern homes usually have security systems. I blinked. Security systems? Cameras, he clarified. The word hit me like a spark. Because Ethan was obsessed with home security. After our parents died, he had installed cameras everywhere. Front door, backyard, garage, and I sat up straighter. The hallway. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What about it? There's a camera near the staircase, I said slowly. It points toward the living room and the hallway outside the dining room. Daniel's expression shifted. If that camera was active that night, it might have recorded everything, I finished. The possibility sent a rush of adrenaline through my chest, because video didn't lie. Video didn't care about manipulation or gaslighting. If the camera had captured Madison pushing me, then Ethan would see the truth. Daniel seemed to be thinking along the same lines. Do you have access to the system? I used to, I said, but Ethan probably changed the passwords. Another pause. Then Daniel said something that made my pulse quicken again. Security systems usually back up recordings automatically. Where? Cloud storage. Hope flickered in my chest. If the footage is still there. Daniel nodded. Then you have exactly what you need. The rain outside the cafe had started falling harder now, but for the first time in days my thoughts felt clear, focused. Madison had manipulated people before. She had controlled the story, the messages, the narrative. But there was one thing she might not have been able to control. The camera. I stood up from the table. Daniel looked up. Where are you going? I grabbed my jacket, to find out if that camera saw what really happened. I didn't go to Ethan's house. That would have been the worst possible move. Madison would see me coming from a mile away. Instead, I went back to my apartment and opened my laptop. If Daniel was right, the camera system in Ethan's house should have been connected to cloud storage, which meant the recordings could still exist. If I could get into the account. I typed Ethan's email into the login screen. Then I stared at the password field. For a moment, I hesitated. Trying to access someone else's security system wasn't exactly something I did every day. But then I remembered the message. Don't contact us again. And the memory of Madison's hands pushing me against the wall. My fingers began to move. Ethan had always been terrible at creating passwords. After years of helping him with random tech problems, I knew his habits better than anyone. First attempt, wrong. Second attempt, wrong again. I exhaled slowly. Come on, Ethan. Third attempt. The screen refreshed, and suddenly the dashboard appeared. My heart skipped. I was in. Rows of camera feeds filled the screen. Front door, driveway, backyard, garage. Then I saw it. Hallway camera. My pulse started racing. I clicked the recording archive and scrolled back to the night everything happened. There it was. The timestamp. 9:42 p.m. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed play. At first, the video looked ordinary. The camera angle showed part of the living room and the hallway outside the dining room. I watched Ethan walk past the camera, heading toward the kitchen. A few seconds later, Madison followed. Then the video caught the moment we stepped into the hallway together. The argument had no sound, but I could still read the tension in our movements. Madison's sharp gestures, my defensive posture. The way we moved closer to each other as the conversation escalated. Then it happened. Madison's hand shot forward. She shoved me. Hard. My body slammed backward against the wall. My head struck the wooden shelf, and I collapsed out of frame. Even though I already remembered the moment, watching it happen on screen sent a chill through my entire body. But the video wasn't finished. Madison stood frozen for a second. Then something strange happened. Instead of running for help, she turned and walked calmly back toward the dining room. My stomach tightened. The camera showed her reaching the table. Ethan's phone was lying exactly where he had left it. Madison picked it up. Even without sound, the next few seconds were unmistakable. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing. Then she placed the phone back down. A moment later, Ethan walked back into frame. He picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and his expression changed instantly. Confusion, anger, shock. Madison stepped toward him immediately, grabbing his arm, explaining something, pointing down the hallway toward where I had fallen. The scene ended with Ethan rushing out of the frame, probably toward me, but by then, the damage had already been done. Because I knew exactly what Madison had typed on that phone. 5 cold words. Don't contact us again. For a long time after the video ended, I just sat there. The room around me felt strangely distant, like everything had moved a few inches farther away. My laptop screen still showed the final frozen frame of the hallway camera. Madison standing beside the dining table. Ethan just entering the room. The moment before everything spiraled out of control. I watched it again. And again. Not because I needed to, but because part of me still couldn't believe what I was seeing. The truth had been sitting there the entire time, waiting for someone to press play. I closed the video player slowly. Then I picked up my phone. My hands felt steadier now, more certain. There was no more guessing. No more theories. Just proof. I opened Ethan's contact again. Still blocked. That part hadn't changed. But there were other ways to send a message. I uploaded the video file to a private cloud link and copied it. Then I opened his work email address again. For a moment I stared at the blank message screen, trying to decide what to say. In the end, I didn't write much. Just one sentence. You deserve to know the truth about that night. Then I pasted the link. My finger hovered over the send button for a second. And then I pressed it. The email went through. This time, there was no error. No delivery failure. Just silence. Minutes passed. Then 20. Then 40. I tried to distract myself by pacing around the apartment, but my mind kept drifting back to the same question. Had he opened it yet? Had he watched it? Finally, just as the sun began sinking behind the buildings outside my window, my phone rang. Ethan. For a moment, I couldn't move. The name glowing on the screen felt unreal. Then instinct took over. I answered. Hello? There was breathing on the other end of the line. Heavy. Unsteady. Liv. His voice sounded different. Lower. Like something inside him had cracked open. You saw it? I asked quietly. For several seconds he didn't answer. Then he exhaled sharply. Yes. The single word carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I didn't know, he said. I swear to God, Olivia. I didn't know. I closed my eyes. A wave of relief and sadness washed through me at the same time. I believe you, I said softly. Another long silence followed. Then Ethan spoke again. When I walked back into the dining room that night, Madison told me you attacked her. His voice shook slightly. She said you lost control, that you pushed her first. I remembered the moment in the video when she grabbed his arm, explaining, directing his attention, controlling the narrative. I was angry, Ethan continued. I thought you'd finally snapped. And the message? I asked. He let out a bitter laugh. I never wrote that. My chest tightened. I figured. Madison must have sent it when I stepped outside, he said. I didn't even check my phone until hours later. I walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker on as evening settled. What happened after you watched the video? I asked. There was another pause. Longer this time. When Ethan finally spoke again, his voice had changed. It was calmer, but colder. I showed it to Madison. My stomach tightened. And? She tried to tell me it was fake. Of course she did. But the timestamps matched, he continued. The camera angle matched. And she was holding my phone. A heavy silence filled the line. Then Ethan said the words I had been waiting for since the moment I woke up in the hospital. I ended it. The tension that had been sitting in my chest for days finally loosened, but Ethan wasn't finished. His next words came out quieter, almost ashamed. I should have listened to you sooner. Ethan came to my apartment the next morning. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. Not because he looked physically different, but because something in his posture had changed. My brother had always carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing exactly where he stood in the world. That certainty was gone now. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept at all. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. Then Ethan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. The hug was sudden and tight. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. The words trembled slightly. I closed my eyes and hugged him back. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Years of memories sat quietly between us. Finally, he stepped back. "She's gone," he said. "What do you mean?" "I told her to leave last night." My chest loosened slightly. "What happened?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, clearly replaying the scene in his head. "At first she denied everything," he said. "That's not surprising. She said the video was edited. Of course, Madison's entire strategy depended on controlling the narrative. But that didn't last long," Ethan continued. I leaned against the kitchen counter while he spoke. "What changed?" She saw my face. Ethan let out a quiet breath. "I think that's when she realized I wasn't buying it anymore." "What did she do then?" His jaw tightened. "She switched tactics." That didn't surprise me either. Madison wasn't the kind of person who gave up easily. "What kind of tactics?" I asked. She started crying. I sighed. "Classic. At first she said she pushed you by accident, the familiar twisting of the story. But then she said, you provoked her." "And then?" I asked. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Then she said you were trying to destroy our relationship." I folded my arms. "That sounds about right. But here's the thing," Ethan said quietly. "She kept changing the story." He looked at me. Every time I pointed out something from the video, the explanation shifted. That was the problem with lies. They rarely stayed consistent for long. Eventually, the contradictions collapsed under their own weight. "What happened when she realized you weren't going to believe her?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. Then he gave a humorless laugh. "She got angry." "How angry?" "She said I was choosing you over her." The accusation hung in the air. I watched Ethan carefully. "And what did you say?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "I told her I was choosing the truth." Something inside my chest warmed slightly at that. "But she wasn't finished," he continued. "Of course not. She said you'd manipulated me." I couldn't help rolling my eyes. "That's impressive considering you watched the video yourself." "Exactly." Ethan leaned against the table. "I think that's when it finally clicked for her." "When what clicked?" "That she had lost control." The silence that followed felt strangely peaceful. For the first time since the night of the argument, the tension between us had begun to dissolve. "What did she do then?" I asked quietly. Ethan stared at the floor for a moment. "Packed a bag." "And?" "She left." Just like that. Months of manipulation, weeks of tension, and one video had shattered the entire illusion, but Ethan wasn't finished yet. "There's something else," he said. "What?" "I called the police this morning." My eyebrows lifted. "For the assault." The words hung in the air. Madison had always relied on controlling the story, but now the story had evidence, and evidence had consequences. 3 months later, the world finally felt quiet again. Not the uncomfortable silence that follows a fight, not the heavy stillness of a hospital room, but the kind of quiet that comes when a storm has finally passed. The late afternoon sun spilled through the windows of my apartment, warming the wooden floor as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. For the first time in a long while, my mind wasn't replaying the same painful memories. The hallway, the fall, the message. "Don't contact us again." Those words had once felt like the end of everything. Now they felt like the beginning of something else, something clearer, something stronger. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I smiled before even opening it. "Hey," Ethan said. He stood in the hallway holding a cardboard box. "What's that?" I asked. "Peace offering," he replied. I stepped aside and let him in. The smell of fresh pastries drifted out of the box as he set it on the kitchen table. "From that bakery you like," he added. I laughed softly. "You're trying very hard lately. Can you blame me?" he said. His tone carried a mix of humor and lingering guilt. Things between us weren't perfect yet. Trust didn't repair itself overnight. But something important had changed. We were talking again. Really talking. The kind of conversation siblings have when they stop pretending everything is fine. Ethan poured himself some coffee while I opened the pastry box. For a few minutes, we just sat there in comfortable silence. Then he said something unexpected. "The police contacted me yesterday." I looked up. "About Madison?" He nodded slowly. "They're investigating her." A strange mix of emotions stirred inside me. What for? Apparently, the situation with Mark wasn't the only incident. That didn't surprise me. Manipulation rarely appears only once. Another ex filed a report. Ethan continued. Similar story. Isolation, arguments, physical confrontation. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the information. So it wasn't just us. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't." The realization felt both unsettling and strangely validating. For weeks I had wondered if I had somehow imagined the danger. If I had exaggerated Madison's behavior in my mind. But the pattern was real. It had always been real. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I keep thinking about how close I came to losing you." I looked at him. "You didn't lose me. I almost did." His voice softened. "And the worst part is, I believed her. I understood the weight of that guilt. But I also understood something else now. People like Madison are very good at what they do," I said. "They don't just lie. They rewrite reality." Ethan nodded slowly. "I guess I learned that the hard way." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he smiled faintly. "You know something?" "What?" "If you hadn't sent that video—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The alternative version of our lives hung silently between us. One where we never spoke again. One where Madison's story became the only truth. But that wasn't the version that happened. Instead, something else had emerged from the chaos. Clarity, honesty, and a strange kind of strength neither of us had before. Ethan stood and grabbed another pastry from the box. "You know Mom would have loved this," he said. I smiled. She definitely would have. He paused before adding something else. "I think she would have been proud of you too." "For what?" "For not giving up." I stared at the sunlight spreading across the kitchen floor. For a long time, I had believed family meant unconditional loyalty, standing beside people no matter what. But the past few months had taught me something different. Real loyalty wasn't blind. Real loyalty required truth. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do for someone you loved was refuse to accept their lies. Ethan glanced toward the window. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "maybe this whole disaster did one good thing." "What's that?" "It reminded me who my real family is." I smiled, and for the first time since everything happened, the word family felt simple again. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes the most painful betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we believe will always stand beside us. For a long time, I thought the night I woke up in the hospital was the moment my family fell apart. My brother believed a lie. The woman he loved turned him against me. and 5 cold words on a phone screen felt like the end of everything. Don't contact us again. At the time, those words felt like a door slamming shut. But now I understand something I didn't see then. That message didn't end my family. It revealed the truth about who was trying to destroy it. Because lies can survive for a while. They can manipulate people. They can twist memories. They can isolate victims. But lies have one weakness. Eventually, the truth shows up. Sometimes it's a forgotten camera recording. Sometimes it's a pattern someone finally notices. And sometimes it's simply the moment when someone decides to stop ignoring the signs. That night changed my relationship with my brother forever. Not because we broke apart, but because we rebuilt something stronger. A relationship based on honesty instead of assumptions. And if this story teaches anything, it's this. Family isn't defined by who stands beside you when everything is easy. Family is revealed when the truth becomes uncomfortable. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you discovered someone close to you was manipulating the people you love, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you risk everything to expose the truth? Write in the comments. Truth always wins. And tell me where you're watching from. Because sometimes sharing your story is the first step toward helping someone else see the truth too.